Hi everyone, Mr.T here, back again from normally sunny Sosua, but today we caught a bit of a grey day, but it's a lovely breeze. I'm sitting here with a guest, Rene Kirchheimer, who you've seen potentially in a previous video where we were covering about different places around Sosua, historic locations. Then I got talking again with Rene afterwards about different events that had happened here, and I realized, wow, I've only just tapped the surface of the knowledge of this gentleman. And we've made some prompts. Rene's going to go through a few of the things that's actually happened here in the past that you may not be aware of. So let's rip into it.
My parents came from Germany. They're from Germany originally, however, they came from Luxembourg because they left Germany because when the Hitler situation was mounting, my father became aware that it was too dangerous, so he skipped into Luxembourg. So his group that came in 1941 was called the Luxembourg Group. Mm-hmm. And we had a few groups coming. This is as a result of the Evian conference in 1938 in France, where the Dominican Republic gave the go-ahead for 100,000 refugees to come in. Mm-hmm. However, it never came to that because complications when the war started. So maybe about 500 to 600, maybe 700 people came down here. Anyway, so I'm a descendant of those people that came to this haven, this paradise in Sosua. We went to school here. I went to school here till I was 14 because at 14 my father sent me to New York. I had a sister on my mother's side. She was 17 years older than me. So she and her husband became my guardians. So I left here when I was 14. My father sent me to school to New York. And I lived in New York for about 6-7 years. I went to junior high school. I went to high school, 1 year of college. And I became a real New Yorker. Plus.
But what was the main motivation in reality why your dad wanted you out of Dominican Republic?
What happened was the following. During my formative years, we were living under the dictatorship of Rafael Trujillo, who was a dictator, which, of course, the group that was here owed him some gratitude because he made the offer for them to be saved. However, as the years progressed, one realized that it was a very, very brutal regime, and it did not permit any opposition. And us as children were influenced by this. And he noticed that I had a rebellious nature. I was always a person, as a child even, as a nonconformist. I didn't go along with the established things when I saw something was wrong. So, conniving, my father said, how would you like to go to New York? He didn't say the reason. Mm-hmm. And of course I said, oh yeah, that's great. But later on when I was older, about 18, he explained to me after Trujillo got killed why he did it. He said, I was afraid that you were going to get involved with this movement that was rebellious, and you either got locked up or you got kidnapped and you got killed. And of course my father cared for me more than my rebellious nature. So that is why I ended up in New York, which I'm grateful because my formative years were, I think, favorably affected by that.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. So how did that situation end up?
Well, actually, I was 19. I happened to be on vacation because I lived in New York when he was killed, Trujillo. And I was about 3 days in the country when it happened. Nobody expected it to happen. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly, boom. Actually, the people were so brainwashed. I'm talking about the masses. Mm-hmm. They all cried his death, because only the middle class and the higher class were aware of the brutality of the regime. The poor people, the very poor people, the people in the campo, in the countryside, they were actually pro-Trujillo, like the same phenomena you had in Germany. A lot of people supported Hitler with all his barbarities. Mm-hmm. So it took about 4 to 5 months where the people actually started throwing down Trujillo statues and really realizing what was going on. Mm-hmm. And so then a party came. There was an opposition party that always spoke on the radio. In those days, we didn't have the internet, but we had shortwave radio. And whoever was caught listening to shortwave radio to Cuba got in trouble. So you always did it late at night or early morning hours. You listened to Fidel Castro speaking, and he was not in power yet, but he was already
On the rise.
On the revolution, course. So anyway, so it was a very tumultuous summer I spent here. As a matter of fact, our main street in Pathé, in Sosua, is called Pedro Cristante. Pedro Cristante was one of the opposition leaders in Sosua, and Alejo Martinez, which is the only secondary main street. Okay, Alejo Martinez was the town doctor.
Okay.
He was having breakfast with his family, with his son, with his mother, and some family on the porch of his house. And Pedro Cristante was going by an old building where the Roca used to be. And we had across the street, where now you have a pizzeria, that used to be the military headquarters. And from then, they shot Pedro Cristante as he was passing by on his motorcycle. I was having breakfast at home. I live across the park, so you could really hear it. When I heard those shots, boom, boom, I said, what's going on? I went outside and I looked, and I saw a military man calling the doctor. Doctor, somebody has shot. You have to come and assist him. So when the doctor came out, they shot him on the street. So that's why the two streets are called Pedro Cristante, and the other one is called Alejo Martinez in honor of their death. His mother threw herself over his body because they wanted to drag him to the military post, because their argument was going to be that those two people tried to assault the military post. It was a complete lie. That's what came out in the papers in Santo Domingo. And she threw herself over his body and said, no, you're not going to move him. So they couldn't move him until they picked him up, to declare him dead and all that. So anyway, that's part of history that many people ignore. Because I was eyewitness of that. I really saw it, and as a matter of fact, I was going to run to where the doctor got shot. My father said, hey, don't go there, So he held me back. That is a very memorable chapter in my brain.
Interesting, yeah. Rene,
Yes.
there was, a lot of people who came here, a lot of Jews that was escaping Hitler's brutality.
Actually, let me correct you there. A lot of Jews were in the group, of course, and it was the main group. But it was non-denominational. The joint, which is what is called from New York, the organization that got those people over here, they didn't care if you were a gypsy, if you were homosexual, if you were Jewish, or if whatever. But most of them comprised of Jews. Go ahead with the question.
Well, why did it suddenly stop that there wasn't an influx of people, of refugees coming anymore?
Well, the main reason, of course, was that once the war broke out, there were a lot of German U-boats, what they used to call them, U-boats, the submarines. And they, as a matter of fact, the ship that brought my parents here on the way back was, not on that trip, but on one of the trips was shot down, sunk.
Sunk,
yeah. So that's one of the main reasons. But also before it got to be that way, that subject is very touchy. Actually, what they wanted, whatever Jews got out of Germany, there was a certain organization, I don't want to name it, because I don't want to cause any big controversy, that their interest was that mainly the people got to Palestine, to the Holy Land. And the joint was interested in saving lives, which was the main essence of the thing.
Objective.
So anyway, that's the main reason, though, that there were U-boats, and so it stopped around 600-700. Like 1942, they couldn't ship any more people. In 1947, another group of Jewish immigrants came from Shanghai, China. They seemed to have escaped Europe to China. and somehow they got wind of, they preferred maybe the tropics, and in an area where already a thriving Jewish community was going on. They wanted to leave China. So we had a big group come from Shanghai in 1947. As a matter of fact, one of the kids that came, I say kids because he was a kid at the time, he became president of the Sosua organization. His name was Hermann Strauss.
Yeah.
He was from the group from China that came. Also a very predominant person in our community was Joe Benjamin. He came in that group. He was the head of the dairy plant for many years.
So Rene, in the past there was an actual bombing that went on here. Was it Sosua Beach? What was that all about? Because a lot of people don't even realize that Sosua Beach has been bombed by planes.
The beach, and there was a hotel up on the hill called Hotel Garden City. It got a lot of holes on the upper part of our house, of the cabins. What happened was the following. It was by mistake. There was an invasion going on in Puerto Plata province and in Constanza in 1959. Puerto Plata called Estero Hondo. It's also a beach area. Somehow, I don't know how and why, the pilots got ordered to bomb, to shoot. Actually, not too many bombs, more like machine gun and a few bombs. So we had a few holes in the approach to the beach. They bombed us, and it was by mistake. They actually didn't mean to bomb Sosua. Luckily, the religious people will say God protected us. Nobody got hurt. It was a very lucky break. But we got shot. A lot of people got afraid. Some of the people that lived in town, they moved back out to the farms.
Right.
That still had the farmhouse. They said, well, let's move out of town. We don't know if it's going to happen. Because they didn't know. This only happened later that they found out it was by mistake.
Right. On June 20th, 1959 at around 8 a.m., Sosua was bombed by the Dominican Air Force. The damage was done to the beach and the local Hotel Garden City. Later, bomb shells were found in El Pathé and the surrounding beach area. Yet no one in Sosua was killed or injured as a result of this attack. The reason behind this horrific event lie in the following set of events. A group of Dominican exiles living in Cuba, along with other nationalities, inspired by Fidel Castro's revolution, made a decision that it was time to overthrow the Trujillo dictatorship, which had been terrorizing the country for almost 30 years. According to the historian Cordero Michel, originally they planned to attack Trujillo from 6 different locations, and there were to be 2 airstrikes through San Juan de la Maguana and Constanza, using C-46 aircrafts. And this would serve to divert attention from the 4 maritime landings that were to be made from fast English assault boats at 2 locations on the north coast and 2 on the south coast. Later the project was altered to instead include 1 aerial landing in either San Juan de la Maguana or Constanza, and 2 maritime landings, one in Sosua and one in La Isabela. Trujillo, through his secret service and extensive network of spies, found out about the coming invasion. The Dominican Navy and Air Force were on high alert and ready to attack. On June the 14th, 1959, the first expedition of oppositionists arrived by plane at the mountainous area of Constanza. Unfortunately, the group was annihilated by Trujillo soldiers. On June the 20th, 1959, the members of the second expedition arrived by boats through the Maimon and Estero Hondo in the Puerto Plata province, under the command of Jose Horacio Rodriguez. However, only part of its members could disembark. The rest died in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean after one boat, Carmen Elsa, was struck and sunk by the Dominican Navy. The air strikes were carried out from P-51 fighters and Vampires. In 2 days of bombardment, the Dominican aviation managed to destroy the resistance. Although the actual numbers of both expeditions were not quite clear to the Trujillo forces, it's recorded that more than 200 people from the resistance were killed during these raids. The bombing once again made the settlers of Sosua relive the horrors of the Holocaust and once again fear for their lives. I've left a link in the description to a more detailed story of these historic events. On August the 14th, 1961, 2 years after the Sosua bombings and shortly after Trujillo's death, Sosua's medical doctor Alejo Martinez and his friend and engineer Pedro Clisante were killed on the streets of Sosua by the leftover forces of Trujillo's regime. It was another great tragedy for the settlers. And why did this happen? Well, after the execution of Trujillo, the country entered into a phase of political turmoil, and that included the resurging of political movements for liberty and democracy. Clisante and Martinez were two courageous activists who sacrificed their lives fighting for freedom. According to a few witnesses, following that massacre, all of Sosua closed its doors, schools were suspended, and the air was full of anxiety, tension and fear. And as you might know, the two main streets of Sosua were named after these two heroes. Now, Rene, talking about documentaries, there was one made here in the past. When was that and what was it about?
1982, it was West Germany at the time still. They sent a crew down here, Westdeutsche Rundfunk, German. They interviewed my family, I would say, mainly my father, my mother, myself. And we were telling the Sosua story. And as a result of that video, my father got a lot of fan mail, about 500-600 letters. And many of them he answered, actually. And as a result, a lot of people were inquiring about Germans who were not Jewish necessarily, just German people. They were inquiring about Sosua, and they saw the beautiful scenery, they saw the beaches, about how it would be if they decided to move down here and live here. Become expats, like you have here now. Yep. And my father answered them. They asked him if he was willing to help them out, to orient them when they first got here. And he said, yeah, he would be very pleased to do that. My father was a very serviceable person. So anyway, so a lot of Germans came down here as a result of that. As a matter of fact, they called him the father of tourism. Because coincidentally, in 1980, our Puerto Plata airport was inaugurated. We used to have an airport here. I became owner of the best restaurant and discotheque in Sosua at the time because I had two German partners who was in the group of those people that came to settle here. His name was Bamfred Breitske, and the other, the chef was called Kai Albrecht. And we were very prosperous, and we instituted a new service here. We had a nice discotheque, and we had flambé, very gourmet food.
Nice.
That was called La Roca restaurant. We sold it to a Canadian person 3 years later because they wanted to go into real estate, my partner.
Well, maybe we should just mention, for those who know Sosua, La Roca is the big building that burnt down at one stage, or the roof anyway, just as you are heading down to the beach.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that used to be the main warehouse way back before Sosua refugees came down here for the banana fruit company.
Yeah.
But it has a lot of history, that building.
That building, yeah.
Then they formed a club called the Residential Club. And my father became honorary member of that. So that was a nice period in the 1980s.
Now, Rene, you also got involved with the tours business down here. So.
Yes, after I sold La Roca, I became manager of Melissa Tours. Melissa Tours was also a travel agency. In those days, you didn't buy your ticket via internet. You actually went physically to an agency and you bought ticket stock, you know. So you had to belong to IATA. There were a lot of regulations still until the deregulation laws came into effect. So I had all the credentials, and the person that was the owner of Melissa Tour came to me and asked me to manage the place because that gave him the status to have ticket stocks of all the airlines, etc. But we also had our own buses, and we were hosting tours to Samaná, to Jarabacoa, to Santo Domingo, to Santiago, beaches in Puerto Plata, everywhere. So Sosua is really, today, physically, a hub. I was managing that, and I was there for about 6 years, I think. And also, concurrently, I formed a musical group, because I'm also into music. So then I wanted to concentrate more on the music, and I left the agency.
Right.
Yeah, I had El Conjunto Arena. Arena means the sand. That's why everybody knows me, not as Rene Kirchheimer, but as Rene Arena. That's how I'm in YouTube also.
Yeah.
Pardon the plug.
Yeah. And the music thing, it took you on stage, you were performing?
Yes, I was back in the 90s, in early 2000. I was on all the major TV shows in Santo Domingo and Santiago, and there's a lot of that on YouTube. And also I did a lot of shows at the hotels in Playa Dorada, in Puerto Plata, in Cabarete, Sosua. We did a lot of entertainment for people to dance music.
That's actually how I met Rene. He was on stage at the Waterfront restaurant.
Yeah.
You've been influenced a lot by Elvis Presley. Do you want to tell the viewers you've actually done Elvis Presley shows?
Well, let me explain something to you, now that you mentioned that. You see, the way I call myself, I'm not imitating Elvis. When I got to New York, that was the way I called myself. And at that time, and this was 1956, Elvis was just on the beginning of his,
So you were the one that had the trend in the first place.
Well,
and he ain't nothing but a hound dog.
Actually, what happened is I read about Elvis. Elvis, like a lot of actors, James Dean, Marlon Brando, and he liked even Mario Lanza. Mario Lanza was an opera singer, and he kind of called himself that way. I guess he got that idea from Mario Lanza. Or and Tony Curtis, who had a lot of bushy hair, black hair.
I tried, but I gave up.
So, but I don't know. I just got that idea before I got to New York. And when I got to New York, the common phrase between the generation was, "Do you like Elvis?" So if you want to be accepted by the group, you had to say yes. You couldn't say, "No, I don't like Elvis." Everybody liked Elvis. So that's how you got involved with Elvis, But of course, Elvis changed through the years. After he came back from the army, he assumed a different, more laid down. He didn't shake like that anymore. A little bit, He always had. Then he had his karate steps and all that. But he went into gospel. Well, he always sang gospel, but he capitulated more on it. Gospel, country, blues, and he got prizes, what do you call the Emmy awards? Got Emmys for all the. So anyway, I like Elvis a lot, but I don't imitate. I'm not a artist like the ones you see on stage with the light suit. I don't imitate Elvis. I imitate what he did to begin with, to take a song, somebody else's song, and make it your own. Do it in your own way. So I sing a lot of Elvis songs, but I like to sing it the way I like to sing it. I don't try to imitate him. If you want to hear the Elvis version, go to YouTube and listen to Elvis. I couldn't do it better. I can do it my way. That's the idea. So, but I do everybody's music. I don't just do Elvis.
Really?
But I like Elvis Presley. He's the king.
Now, Rene, your father also got some kind of honorable award from Germany. Can you tell the viewers what that was all about?
It was sometime in the late 80s, I guess. He got an award as recognition for his efforts to help all the German citizens that came down here. Some people even criticized him. What are you doing helping Germans? There's some people that still have the bad idea of the only good German is a dead German. He said, listen, that's another generation. My father's thinking was like that. Germany is not like that anymore, because he had gone back to Germany on a trip once with my mother. They visited his hometown and visited Hamburg. He said, they don't deserve to be punished by what other people did. So he helped German embassy to set straight all the paperwork they had to do with the Dominican government to settle here. He also helped the few Jewish people that were still here to get their what do you call it, the payments, retribution payments from Germany. Also, they were reinstated as German citizens because, Hitler deprived them of the citizenship. They were reinstated the citizenship, and later on when it became the European Union, they got their new passports as a member of the European Union. Yeah. So my father did all that in his efforts. So therefore, they wanted to give him recognition, and they had the ambassador come down to Sosua. As a matter of fact, I'm going to give you a picture of that when he was awarded. It's like a red cross and in a big whatever.
You were yourself recently put into a position here in Sosua. What's your new position?
I'm director of the cultural and artistic department now with the new mayor. Yes.
Okay, so what kind of projects will be coming up based on that?
Well, right now, so we can't do any big events. But my idea is that maybe if it opens up a little bit more next year, we're going to have like the first Sosua festival. Sosua 2021. And next year after that, Sosua 2022. We're going to have the first festival is going to be with local musicians, be it natives. We have a lot of good musicians here, and some expats who live here who are very, very good musicians. So we can do a very decent show, open air stage, and institute that for every year to have a major festival. And also to have some other cultural events, whatever, I want to see to that. Also, I want to see to have a better relationship with another city. I'm looking for Sosua, a sister city. Next month, I'm going to Florida, and I'm going to see if I can do some steps towards that. Great. Sosua is sister city with another city who would have a lot of Jewish element. They would be very interested in the history of Sosua and how it became a haven to save, fellow Jews. Be a good touristic angle, and at the same time informative for those people to know what went on.
Excellent. Now, you also mentioned something about was it a big party or something where the president came up here?
Yes, every 10 years more or less, Sosua makes a celebration. They had the 10th anniversary. 1940 is when the colony of the refugees started. So in 1940 was started. 1950 they made a 10-year celebration. 60 they made it, whatever. And in 1980 they made the 40-year celebration. And at that celebration, we even had the assistance of the president of the country and the first lady. There was President Guzman and Doña Rene, there was one, which the first lady, which was an honor for Sosua for them to assist. It was a big party, and we had also a ceremony which was conducted by a Catholic pastor and by a Jewish rabbi. In other words, it was like, I think you call it ecumenical. It was like non-denominational type religious ceremony because two different religions were leading it, but it was like a sign of brotherhood between the Jews and the local people who were mainly Catholics at the time, because now we have a lot of evangelical people too here. So anyway, I think it was very significant that this coming together of two cultures in a very brotherly fashion. I was fascinated by it. I even sang at that party. I remember that.
It pops just one question, and that'll probably be the last question. Then there was a couple of people you wanted to give some honourable mentions to.
Yes.
Sosua has obviously become, it started and it became very different than how other towns or cities evolved around Dominican Republic. Now, if you went to San Francisco de Macorís, or you went to Mocha, you went to other places, and you asked people, what's your impression of Sosua? What would the elderly people say? What would the young people say?
Well, the thing is, Sosua is different. Anybody who comes to Sosua and goes to the other places that you mentioned, San Francisco, Santiago, Moca, La Vega, they all look pretty much the same, typical Dominican, you know. But you come to Pathé, Sosua, you can tell that there's something cosmopolitan, something foreign involved here. And we gave it a different taste, and this is what attracts people. Because when people are tourists, they want to see something different. They don't want to see what they have at home. In my formative years, until I was 14 in Central New York, a lot of things happened that were very impressionable in my psyche, you know, the way I am. One is, of course, all the musicals I saw we had a movie, a barrack, which was a movie house, so all the Hollywood musicals. So I got very in love with music and dancing. That's one aspect. The other aspect is I had two teachers that really, really had big significance in my life. One is Dr. Walter Robichek and Mrs. Judith Keeble. I'll tell you why. Dr. Robichek was stricken by polio still while he was in Europe, and he came here as a refugee, but he could have been a professor in a major university. But he decided to stay here, and we had the privilege of having him as a teacher in elementary school. I had him as a teacher in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And this guy was brilliant. It's like having, I would compare it to, no, maybe not as much, but something comparable to, if you as a child had Einstein as a teacher, you know, it was very impressionable. As a matter of fact, he even had some kind of impact from my person, even though I was just a child. I had the honor on the 8th grade to be the one to pick him up and take him home on his wheelchair. This was manually done, no vehicle. You know, I'd take him from the school was only about 300 meters away, but I am the one who went, picked him up, took him to school, and took him back home. That for me was a big honor. And I was just a little shrimp. And I grew up, whatever I grew, from 14 to 16, I did that growing in New York. I was just a little kid for 14, but I knew how to handle the wheelchair. That was an honor. And Mrs. Judith Keeble was a lady who was trained in Vienna. You know, Vienna was known for the culture and the music. She was a pianist, and she was our music teacher. So that got me even more involved with music. We always, every holiday, Jewish holiday or Dominican holiday, the theater we had a roll-off screen. We rolled off the screen, and there was a stage behind. So we had a choir there, we sang, we did some plays. So it was really, really an excellent childhood we had. And everybody that listens to this video, was part of this. They know, they remember, they know what I'm talking about. It's a once in a lifetime, or once in many generation occurrence, the kind of childhood we had in the old Sosua. Terrific.
Hey, fantastic information. We'll have Rene back on camera again at a later date, but thank you very much for sharing
always a pleasure.
Your knowledge and your experiences to everybody out there, because it's about keeping these things alive so new expats and new generations of people, they can understand how Sosua was given birth to and evolved.
Let me just add one thing. That's why I was invited to Evian 2 years ago to celebrate the 80th anniversary of the Evian Conference in 1938. And I had a few words of gratitude towards our country and the Joint of New York for having executed that chapter for us.
Very good. So if you like this video, please share it with your friends and subscribe. Also subscribe to my BitChute channel, same name, Educated Traveler, but that's more politically lent in there. And take care, have a nice day, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.